The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was built to hold 10,000 beings from across the known universe. Its ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath the glass dome. Light poured in from 3 distant suns, casting long shadows across the polished stone floor. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated sections, each one watching the human delegation with nervous eyes. Admiral Lisa Grant walked to the central podium with slow and steady steps. She had served in the United Earth Navy for 30 years. She had seen battles that would haunt her until her final breath. But nothing had prepared her for this moment. The fate of billions rested on the words she would speak today. Behind her stood Captain Jake Morrison. He was younger than Lisa by 15 years, but his face carried the same weight of experience. He had fought in the border skirmishes near the outer colonies. He had lost friends to Vraxian raiders. He understood why they were here and what they were asking for. The council chamber fell into complete silence as Lisa reached the podium. She could feel the tension in the air like a physical thing pressing against her chest. These aliens had invited humanity into their galactic community over 100 years ago. They had shared technology and knowledge and trade, but they had never truly trusted humans. Not completely. Not when it came to war. Ambassador Vortesh of the Kalari Dominion was the first to speak. He was tall and thin with skin that shifted colors depending on his mood. Right now, it was a deep shade of purple that Lisa had learned meant fear. His voice echoed through the chamber as he raised one translucent hand. "We must discuss the human delegation's request to deploy their battleships to the frontier war," he said. "This is not a matter we take lightly." Lisa nodded respectfully before she began her response. "Ambassador, the situation at the frontier grows worse with each passing day. The Vraxian swarm has taken 14 colony worlds in the last 6 months. Our allies are losing ground. The Pellerin defense fleet has been reduced to half its original strength. The Kalari support vessels cannot hold the line alone." She paused to let her words sink in before continuing. "The United Earth Navy has 47 battleships ready for deployment. We are offering our full strength to this alliance. We are asking for permission to fight alongside our friends." A ripple of whispers spread through the council chamber. Lisa watched as delegates leaned toward each other and spoke in hushed tones. She did not need to understand their languages to know what they were saying. They were afraid. Not of the Vraxians. They were afraid of humans. The Pellerin delegate rose from his seat. His name was High Voice Salaith, and his body was made of living crystal that chimed softly when he moved. His species had been hit hardest by the Vraxian attacks. 12 of the 14 fallen colonies had belonged to the Pellerin people. "Admiral Grant," Salaith said in a voice like wind through glass pipes, "we are grateful for the offer of assistance. Truly we are. But you must understand our hesitation. We have seen the records from the Battle of Kepler 22. We know what human battleships are capable of doing." Jake shifted his weight behind Lisa. She could feel his frustration without even turning to look at him. They had expected this response, but it still stung to hear it spoken aloud. Humanity had proven itself in battle decades ago. They had saved the galaxy from the first Vraxian invasion. And yet here they stood, begging for permission to help. "High Voice Salaith," Lisa replied calmly. "The Battle of Kepler 22 was a defensive action. We protected our colonies and pushed back an invading force. Surely that is exactly what this alliance needs right now." Salaith made a sound like cracking ice. It was the Pellerin equivalent of a bitter laugh. "You did far more than push them back, Admiral. You hunted them across 200 light years. You broke their fleet so completely that they could not threaten anyone for 60 years. Do you not see why that concerns us?" Lisa felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her expression neutral. "We ended the threat. We ensured they could not return to hurt anyone else. You ended them, Salith corrected. There is a difference. Ambassador Vartash stood again, and his skin had shifted to an even darker shade of purple. Perhaps the humans do not fully understand why we have kept their vessels in reserve for so long. Perhaps it is time they were told the complete truth of how the galaxy views their military capabilities. The chamber fell silent once more. Lisa looked around at the assembled delegates and saw the same expression on every face, regardless of species. It was the look of people who had witnessed something terrible and could not forget it. Something that still gave them nightmares after all these years. Jake leaned forward and whispered near her ear. They are actually afraid of us helping them. They would rather lose this war than let us fight. Lisa gave a slight nod without turning her head. She had suspected this for years. Every time humanity had offered military assistance, the Council had found reasons to decline. Training exercises were canceled. Joint operations were postponed. Human battleships were always assigned to rear guard positions where they would never see combat. Now she understood why. The galaxy did not see humans as allies. They saw them as weapons. Dangerous weapons that should only be used as a last resort. Weapons that might cause more destruction than the enemy. They were meant to fight. Ritesh gestured toward a doorway at the side of the chamber. We have arranged for a member of your delegation to receive a full historical briefing. Our finest scholars will explain everything. Then perhaps you will understand why we cannot simply unleash human battleships on the battlefield. Lisa turned to Jake and spoke quietly. Go with them. Learn whatever they want to teach us. I will stay here and continue negotiations. Jake hesitated for a moment. He did not want to leave her alone in this room full of beings who clearly did not want humanity's help. But he also understood the importance of gathering information. Knowledge was power, and right now they had very little of either. Understood, Admiral, he said, before following a Kelari attendant toward the doorway. Lisa watched him go before turning back to face the Council. The delegates were still watching her with those nervous eyes. She realized that convincing them would take more than words. It would take time and patience, and perhaps a crisis so terrible that they had no other choice. She hoped it would not come to that. But deep in her heart, she knew it would. Jake followed the Kelari attendant through winding corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were made of some material that glowed faintly from within, casting soft blue light across the floor. He had been walking for nearly 20 minutes before they finally reached a circular chamber filled with strange equipment. An elderly Kelari stood waiting for him near the center of the room. This one was different from the others Jake had seen. His skin did not shift colors, but remained a steady shade of silver gray. His movements were slow and careful, like someone who had lived for a very long time and learned to conserve his energy. I am Vethner, the old Kelari said. I have studied the history of galactic warfare for 300 of your Earth years. I was alive when your species first made contact with our civilization. I remember what you were like before you became what you are now. Jake stood at attention out of respect. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me, Historian Vethna. The old Kelari made a gesture that Jake assumed was meant to put him at ease. Sit, young human. What I am about to show you will take some time to process. It is better if you are comfortable. Jake found a seat on a curved bench that seemed to mold itself to his body. Vethner activated the equipment around them, and suddenly the room filled with holographic images. Stars and planets and ships appeared out of thin air, floating all around them like they were sitting in the middle of space itself. Your species joined the galactic community 112 standard years ago, Vethner began. At that time, you were considered primitive by our standards. Your fastest ships could barely reach a fraction of light speed. Your weapons were chemical projectiles and crude nuclear devices. The Kalari Dominion welcomed you as we welcome all new species. We gave you technology as a gift. Faster than light travel. Energy weapons. Shield generators. We believed you would use these gifts to explore and trade and grow peacefully. Jake nodded slowly. He knew this part of history from his academy training. Earth had been struggling with resource shortages when the Kalari made first contact. Their technology had changed everything overnight. For 50 years, humanity did exactly what we expected, Vethner continued. You built colonies on distant worlds. You established trade routes with other species. You seemed content to be a minor member of the galactic community. Then the Vraxians came. The hologram shifted to show a different kind of ship. These vessels were organic in appearance, covered with dark scales and sharp protrusions that looked almost like bones. They moved through space like predators hunting prey. The Vraxian swarm had been dormant for centuries, Vethner explained. When they awakened, they were hungry. They attacked your colony on Titan without warning. 40,000 humans died in a single night. Men and women and children. The Vraxians did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They simply consumed everything in their path. Jake felt his hands tighten into fists. He had seen images of the Titan massacre in his training materials. But seeing it displayed like this, watching holographic Vraxian ships descend on the domed cities, made it feel more real than ever before. We expected your species to react the way most young civilizations react to such trauma, Vethner said. We thought you would mourn your dead and then negotiate for peace. Perhaps you would offer tribute to keep the Vraxians satisfied. Perhaps you would retreat to your home system and build stronger defenses. That is what reasonable species do when faced with overwhelming force. The old historian paused and his silver skin seemed to darken slightly. But humans are not reasonable. Not when it comes to those you love. Not when it comes to those you have lost. The hologram changed again to show Earth's orbital shipyards. Jake watched in amazement as construction platforms worked at impossible speed. Ships were being assembled in weeks instead of years. Workers moved in constant rotation, never stopping, never resting. In 80 months, your species built something that should have taken decades, Vethner said. You took the technology we gave you and you broke it apart. You studied every component until you understood it better than we did. Then you reassembled it into something new, something we had never imagined was possible. The display showed a ship emerging from dry dock. It was not elegant like the Kalari vessels or sleek like the Pellerin cruisers. It was angular and brutal, covered with weapon arrays that seemed far too large for its hull. The designation painted on its side read USS Valor. The Defiance-class battleship, Jake whispered. Yes, Vethner confirmed. Your first true warship. Your engineers had discovered something about our shield technology that we had overlooked for centuries. By reversing the polarity and channeling it through your weapon systems, you could create energy bursts that bypassed enemy shields entirely. A single shot from a Defiance-class cannon could destroy ships that were considered invincible. Jake leaned forward in his seat. He had always known that human battleships were powerful, but he had never understood exactly why. The Academy taught tactics and strategy, not the science behind the weapons. The Vraxians returned 2 years after the Titan massacre, Vethner continued. They brought 431 ships to finish what they had started. They expected to find a broken species ready to surrender. Instead, they found 12 human battleships waiting for them at Kepler-22. The hologram displayed the battle in stunning detail. Jake watched as the human vessels formed a tight formation and charged directly into the Vraxian swarm. Every shot from the human cannons found its target. Every missile struck with devastating accuracy. Vraxian ships exploded by the dozens as the human fleet carved a path through their formation. The battle lasted 6 hours, Vethner said quietly. When it ended, all 431 Vraxian ships had been destroyed. The human fleet lost none. Not a single vessel. Jake stared at the aftermath displayed before him. The debris field stretched across millions of kilometers. There was nothing left of the Vraxian attack force but scattered wreckage. That should have been the end of it, Vethner said. The threat was eliminated. Your colonies were safe. But your Admiral Catherine Cole made a different choice. The hologram showed the human fleet turning away from the battlefield. But they were not heading home. They were pursuing the retreating Vraxian ships deeper into space. She chased them, Jake said. For 200 light years, Vethner confirmed. She hunted down every survivor. She tracked them back to their spawning worlds. And then she did something that no species in galactic history had ever done before. She did not just defeat the Vraxians. She broke them so completely that they could not threaten anyone for 60 years. The old historian deactivated the hologram and turned to face Jake directly. The galaxy watched what your species did that day. We saw how you fight. We saw that you do not stop when you have won. You stop when you are certain that the enemy can never hurt anyone again. And that, young human, is why we are afraid. Jake sat in silence for a long moment. He finally understood why the Council was so hesitant to accept human help. They were not worried about losing the war. They were worried about what humanity might do to win it. Lisa Grant stood alone in the memorial garden on the surface of Luna. The dome above her head was perfectly clear, showing the star-filled blackness of space and the blue curve of Earth hanging in the distance. Around her stood hundreds of granite pillars arranged in perfect rows. Each pillar bore the names of those who had died in service to humanity among the stars. She walked slowly between the pillars until she found the one she was looking for. Her fingers traced the carved letters of a name she had known her entire life. Commander Paul Grant, her father. He had served aboard one of the ships in Admiral Cole's fleet during the long chase across the stars. He had survived the Battle of Kepler 22 and every engagement that followed. But he had not survived what came after. The sound of footsteps on gravel made her turn. A broad-shouldered man with gray hair approached her from the garden entrance. Daniel Hunt was the Secretary of Defense for United Earth. He was one of the few people who knew the full truth about what had happened 60 years ago. I heard the Council denied your request, Daniel said as he stopped beside her. Lisa nodded without looking away from her father's name. They will keep denying it. I understand that now. Jake received a history lesson from one of their scholars. He told me everything. Daniel was quiet for a moment before he spoke again. So you know why they keep us in reserve. You know what they are afraid of. They are afraid we are too effective, Lisa replied. They are afraid that if they let us fight, we will not know when to stop. Daniel sat down on a stone bench near the pillar. His joints ached from years of stress and too many hours spent in council chambers arguing for resources and funding. It goes deeper than that, Lisa. They are not just afraid of what we do on the battlefield. They are afraid of what we become when the fighting is over. Lisa finally turned to look at him. What do you mean? After Kepler 22, the Vraxians offered unconditional surrender, Daniel explained. They sent messages on every frequency begging for mercy. They promised to retreat to their home systems and never threaten anyone again. Admiral Cole received those messages. She acknowledged them. And then she kept hunting. Lisa felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. I know the official history. She was ensuring they could not rebuild. That is what we tell ourselves, Daniel said. That is what we teach in the academies. But the truth is more complicated. He looked up at her with tired eyes. Your father was there, Lisa. He was the communications officer on the Valor. He was the one who received the surrender messages and passed them to Admiral Cole. He watched her read them and delete them without a word. Lisa sat down beside him. Her legs felt weak suddenly. He never told me that. He never told anyone. Not until the end. Daniel stared at the granite pillar bearing Paul Grant's name. Your father carried that secret for 40 years. It aided him from the inside. The knowledge that we had won the war at Kepler 22, that the Vraxians were ready to surrender, and that we chose to keep killing anyway. The garden was perfectly silent, except for the soft hum of the life support systems maintaining the dome. Lisa thought about her father, about the man who had raised her and encouraged her to join the Navy. She had always believed he was proud of his service. Now she wondered how much pain he had hidden behind his smiles. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because you need to understand what we are asking for when we request deployment, Daniel replied. The galaxy does not see us as heroes, Lisa. They see us as something dangerous. Something that needs to be controlled. And the worst part is that they might be right. Lisa shook her head slowly. We have changed since then. We have learned from those mistakes. Admiral Cole's actions were extreme. They would never be repeated today. Would they not? Daniel leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. Look at our training programs. Look at the doctrine we teach our officers. We still emphasize total victory above all else. We still train our soldiers to fight until the enemy can never threaten us again. The words have changed, but the philosophy remains the same. Lisa wanted to argue with him. She wanted to defend the Navy she had served for 30 years. But she could not find the words. Deep down, she knew he was speaking the truth. She had felt it herself in combat. That burning need to push forward, to chase the retreating enemy, to make absolutely certain they could never come back. So what do we do? She asked quietly. Do we just accept that we will never be allowed to help? Do we watch our allies die because the galaxy is too afraid to use us? Daniel stood up and walked to her father's pillar. He placed one hand on the cold stone. We wait, we prepare. And when the moment comes, when things get bad enough that they have no other choice, we show them that we can be trusted. How do we do that? By fighting the way they need us to fight, not the way our instincts tell us to fight. He turned to face her. If the Council ever gives us permission to deploy, we need to prove that humanity has grown. We need to show them that we can defeat an enemy without destroying them completely. That we can win a war without becoming monsters. Lisa thought about his words for a long time. The memorial garden stretched out around her, filled with the names of those who had given their lives for humanity. Her father was among them, not killed by enemy weapons, but broken by the weight of what he witnessed, what he had been part of. The Vraxians are back, she said finally. They have spent 60 years rebuilding, 60 years remembering what we did to them. When they look at human battleships, they see the species that nearly wiped them out. They will fight us with everything they have. Yes, Daniel agreed. And when that day comes, we will need to be ready, not just to defeat them, but to prove to the galaxy that we can show mercy when mercy is deserved. Lisa stood up and took one last look at her father's name carved in stone. She thought about the man he had been before the war and the broken man he had become afterward. She made a silent promise to him that she would do better, that when her moment came, she would find another way. I should return to the fleet, she said. Jake will have reported back by now. We need to prepare for whatever comes next. Daniel nodded. The Council will deny your requests a few more times. But the war is getting worse every day. Eventually, they will run out of options. And when that happens, humanity will answer the call. Lisa walked toward the garden exit without looking back. She had come here seeking clarity, and she had found something else entirely. She had found the truth about her father and her species and herself. Now she needed to decide what to do with that knowledge. The stars watched in silence as she left the memorial behind. 3 weeks passed in tense silence. The human fleet remained in orbit around Earth, running training exercises and maintenance routines while the war at the frontier grew worse by the day. Jake spent most of his time on the bridge of the battleship USS Relentless, watching the news reports come in from the front lines. Captain Maria Santos commanded the Relentless with a steady hand. She was a compact woman with sharp eyes and black hair that she kept tied back in a tight braid. She had served in the Navy for 22 years and had never seen actual combat. None of the current generation of officers had. The last real battle involving human ships had been fought before any of them were born. Another colony has fallen, Communications Officer Kevin Price announced from his station. His voice was heavy with frustration. The Pellerin world of Crystalheim. Population of 300 million. The Vraxians took it in less than 6 hours. Maria stood at the central command platform with her hands clasped behind her back. Any survivors? Refugee ships are still escaping the system, Kevin replied. But the evacuation was only partial. Estimates suggest at least 60 million were left behind. Jake felt sick to his stomach. 60 million people, trapped on a world that was now crawling with Vraxian forces. He knew what that meant. The Vraxians did not take prisoners. They did not occupy territory. They consumed everything they touched. This is wrong, he said quietly. We are sitting here running drills while billions of people are dying out there. Maria glanced at him with understanding in her eyes. I know how you feel, Captain Morrison. I feel it too. But we have our orders. Until the Council authorizes deployment, we cannot move. The Council will never authorize deployment, Jake replied bitterly. They would rather lose this war than let us fight it. The bridge was silent for a moment. Every officer at every station shared the same frustration. They had the power to make a difference. They had the ships and the weapons and the training. But they were trapped by politics and fear and the memory of events that had happened before they were born. The communications panel suddenly lit up with an incoming transmission. Kevin's eyes went wide as he read the header information. Captain, we have a Priority 1 message from the Galactic Council. It is addressed to the entire human fleet. Maria stepped toward the main display. Put it through. The face of Ambassador Vertesh appeared on the screen. His skin was cycling through colors so rapidly that it created a strobing effect. Jake had never seen a Kilari display such extreme emotion before. Attention all human vessels, Vertesh said. His voice was shaking. The Galactic Council has authorized immediate deployment of all available battleships to the Pellerin border. The Vraxian swarm has broken through our defensive line. 12 billion Pellerin civilians are in the path of the advancing fleet. We are requesting human assistance. The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun. Maria stood frozen at the command platform. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the entire bridge erupted into controlled chaos as officers began preparing for deployment. All hands to battle stations, Maria announced over the shipwide communication system. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. We are deploying to the Pellerin border. Jake moved to his tactical station and began running system checks. His hands were steady despite the adrenaline pumping through his veins. He had trained for this moment his entire career. Now it was finally happening. Within the hour, the human fleet was assembled and ready. 47 battleships formed up in perfect formation around the fleet flagship USS Ironclad. Admiral Lisa Grant's voice came through on the command channel, calm and steady as always. All vessels, prepare for faster than light jump. We will be joining allied forces from 6 different species at the designated coordinates. Remember your training. Remember your discipline. And remember that the galaxy is watching what we do today. The jump engines activated, and the stars stretched into brilliant lines of light. Jake felt the familiar sensation of displacement as the ship crossed impossible distances in the span of a heartbeat. When reality snapped back into focus, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The Vraxian swarm filled the tactical display. Thousands of ships, more than Jake had ever imagined possible, were spread across the sector like a dark cloud. They moved together in perfect coordination, a single predatory organism hunting its prey. In the distance, the Pellerin refugee convoy was desperately trying to reach safety. Hundreds of civilian transports packed with families and children, running as fast as their engines could carry them. The Allied fleet had already formed a defensive line between the swarm and the refugees. Jake could see Kelari cruisers and Pellerin destroyers and ships from 4 other species he could not immediately identify. 300 vessels standing against thousands. It was not enough. It would never be enough. Human fleet form spearhead formation, Admiral Grant ordered. We are going through them. Maria took her position at the center of the bridge. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with determination. You heard the Admiral. All power to forge shields and weapons. Today we show them what humanity is made of. The human battleships pulled ahead of the Allied fleet. 47 vessels against thousands. The odds were impossible by any reasonable calculation. But Jake had studied the Battle of Kepler-22. He knew what human ships could do when they had no choice but to fight. All vessels, engage. Admiral Grant commanded. The Relentless surged forward with the rest of the fleet. Jake watched the distance counter drop as they closed on the enemy formation. His targeting systems locked onto the nearest Vraxian ships, and his fingers hovered over the firing controls. Weapons range in 30 seconds. Kevin announced. Maria stood perfectly still at the command platform. Hold formation. Wait for the Admiral's signal. The Vraxian ships began to react to the human approach. Hundreds of them broke away from the main swarm and turned to face the incoming threat. Jake could see their weapon systems charging, preparing to unleash destruction on the advancing battleships. Range achieved. Kevin reported. Admiral Grant's voice came through one final time. All vessels, open fire. The Relentless trembled as every weapon system discharged simultaneously. Beams of energy and salvos of missiles streaked across the void toward the enemy fleet. Jake watched in amazement as the shots found their targets with impossible accuracy. Vraxian ships exploded by the dozens, their shields worthless against the modified human weapons. The battle had begun. And somewhere in the chaos, Jake remembered the words of the old historian. The galaxy was watching to see if humanity had truly changed, to see if they could win a war without becoming the monsters they had once been. He prayed they would not disappoint. The battle lasted 9 hours. Jake would remember every minute of it for the rest of his life. The Relentless carved a path through the Vraxian swarm alongside her sister ships, weapons firing continuously until the barrels glowed white-hot. Enemy vessels exploded all around them as the human fleet pushed deeper into the enemy formation. Jake worked his tactical station without rest, coordinating firing solutions and tracking enemy movements. Sweat dripped down his face and his muscles ached from tension, but he could not afford to stop. Every second of hesitation meant more Vraxian ships breaking through toward the refugee convoy. The Allied fleet followed behind the human spearhead, mopping up stragglers and protecting the flanks. Jake could hear their communications on the shared channel. Kelari captains shouting orders in their melodic language. Pellerin commanders coordinating rescue operations. All of them sounding equal parts amazed and terrified at what the human ships were doing. Enemy formation is breaking, Kevin reported from his station. They are trying to regroup around their command ships. Captain Maria Santos studied the tactical display with narrowed eyes. If we let them regroup, they will come at us with coordinated attacks. We need to keep the pressure on. Admiral Grant's voice came through the command channel. All vessels, pursue and engage. Do not let them reform their lines. The Relentless surged forward with renewed power. Jake watched the distance counter drop as they closed on the Vraxian command cluster. These ships were larger than the others, covered with extra armor and bristling with weapons. They were the brains of the swarm, the ships that coordinated the movements of thousands of smaller vessels. Multiple targets acquired, Jake announced. Ready to fire on your command, Captain. Maria hesitated for just a moment. Jake saw something flicker across her face. A memory, perhaps. Or a warning. Wait, the Admiral said pursue and engage. She did not say destroy at all costs. Kevin looked up from his station. Captain, if we do not take out those command ships, the swarm could reorganize. I am aware of the tactical situation, Lieutenant. Maria turned to face the main display. But I am also aware of our history. We are not going to chase a retreating enemy to extinction. Not today. She opened a channel to the flagship. Admiral Grant, the Vraxian command cluster is within weapons range. They appear to be preparing to retreat. Request permission to disable rather than destroy. There was a long pause before the Admiral responded. Jake could imagine her sitting on the bridge of the ironclad, weighing the same memories and concerns that Maria was facing. The ghost of Admiral Catherine Cole hovering over every decision. Permission granted, Captain Santos. Disable their engines and weapons. Leave them alive. The order spread across the human fleet. Jake adjusted his targeting parameters, switching from lethal shots to precision strikes against propulsion and weapon systems. It was harder this way. It required more skill and more time. But it was the right thing to do. The Relentless opened fire along with the rest of the human vessels. Vraxian command ships went dark one by one as their systems were knocked offline. They tumbled through space, helpless but intact. Alive but defeated. Without their command ships to coordinate them, the remaining Vraxian forces fell into chaos. Smaller vessels scattered in every direction, fleeing the battlefield as fast as their engines could carry them. The swarm that had threatened to consume 12 billion lives dissolved into a disorganized mob running for survival. All enemy forces are in full retreat, Kevin announced. The refugee convoy has reached safe space. We won. The bridge of the Relentless erupted in cheers. Officers embraced each other and shouted in triumph. But Maria remained still at the command platform, watching the disabled Vraxian ships drift through the debris field. What do we do with them? Jake asked quietly. Maria considered the question for a long moment. We call for the Allied fleet to take them into custody. They will be prisoners of war. They will be treated with dignity and respect. And someday, when this conflict ends, they will be returned to their people as a gesture of peace. Jake nodded slowly. He understood what she was doing, what the entire human fleet was doing. They were sending a message to the galaxy, a message that said humanity could win without losing its soul. 6 hours later, Jake sat in the medical bay of the Relentless with a bandage wrapped around his arm. A piece of shrapnel had caught him during the final assault when a Vraxian missile had detonated too close to the hull. The wound was minor, but the ship's doctor had insisted on treating it personally. A Pellerin medic named Crystalline Voice worked beside the human doctor, assisting with the treatment. The alien's body chimed softly with every movement, creating a gentle melody that filled the medical bay. I watched your ships fight today, Crystalline Voice said without looking up from the medical scanner. I did not believe what I was seeing at first. I thought perhaps the reports from Kepler-22 had been exaggerated. Jake winced as the doctor applied a healing agent to his wound. And now? Now I understand why the Council kept you in reserve. The Pellerin finally looked up, and Jake could see his own reflection in the alien's crystalline surface. Other species fight to survive, to protect what they have, to prove they are stronger than their enemies. But humans fight differently. You fight as if every battle is the last battle you will ever need to fight. You give everything you have without hesitation or fear. Is that a bad thing? Jake asked. It is terrifying, Crystalline Voice admitted. But today, it saved 12 billion of my people. Today, I am grateful for the way humans fight. On the bridge of the damaged ironclad, Admiral Lisa Grant stood at the viewport, watching the Allied ships gather the survivors. Pellerin families were being transferred to relief vessels. Wounded were being treated. The dead were being collected and honored. Captain Maria Santos had transferred over from the Relentless to deliver her report in person. She stood beside Lisa, watching the same scene unfold. They will put us back in reserve now, Maria said. They will thank us for our help and then ask us to return to our quiet patrols. Lisa nodded slowly. And we will go. We will wait until the next time they need us. Does it bother you? Being the weapon they only use when everything else has failed? Lisa considered the question carefully before answering. We are not weapons, Maria. We are the promise that no matter how dark things become, someone will stand in the gap. They can keep us far from the battlefield as long as they want. But when the time comes, when it truly matters, humanity will answer the call. Maria smiled slightly. And the galaxy will remember why they were afraid of us. No, Lisa turned away from the viewport. They will remember why they should be grateful. The human fleet formed up for the long journey home. In council chambers across 100 worlds, delegates would debate whether to return the battleships to reserve status. But in the refugee ships and rescue stations, a different conversation was happening. Parents told children about the angular human vessels that had charged into impossible odds without hesitation. They spoke of a species that fought not for glory or conquest, but simply because they refused to let others suffer. For the sake of war, the galaxy would always try to keep human battleships far from the battlefield. But for the sake of peace, for the sake of hope, they would always be glad that humanity was there. The stars watched in silence as the fleet disappeared into the void, waiting for the next time they would be needed.